Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine viewing audience. We are here for another installment of the CDO Magazine Executive Interview Series. Today, I'm joined by Mike Anderson, who's the Chief Digital Officer and the Chief Information Officer of Netskope. My name is Kirk Ball, and I'm the Chief Information Officer of Worldpay. So, Mike, I'm going to ask you just to take a few minutes and introduce yourself and introduce Netskope, and then we'll dive into our discussion.
Great. Thanks, Kirk. Excited to be here. So Mike Anderson, as Kirk said, I'm the Chief Digital Officer and CIO here at Netskope. For those that are familiar with Netskope, we're a cloud security company that's redefining both networking and security with a strong focus on AI as well, of course, in today's age. This is entering my 13th year as a CIO and 25th year in technology. So excited for this conversation.
And Mike, how long at Netskope?
I have been here just over 4.5 years now.
That's awesome. I know Netskope is doing some great things in the marketplace. I stay up with them, and I know you guys are continuing your offerings and your capabilities. So we'll get into that here in a little bit. So you've had a very successful career as a technology executive, but at Netskope, you mentioned earlier, you're not just the CIO. You're also deeply involved in customer conversations and go-to-market efforts. How has this particular role that you're currently in stretched you beyond what you're typically used to in being a CIO?
No, it's interesting, Kirk. Before I started my career as a CIO, I spent my entire career in technology. I would say there's two chapters, or probably multiple chapters when I really think about it in my career. But I spent my entire career in technology, but the first half of my career, or the first decade or more, I spent working in technology roles in technology companies, whether it was running a sales engineering team, running a sales overlay organization, running operations in a Microsoft joint venture, being a GM for a system integrator. And so as I pivoted into becoming a CIO, one of my customers recruited me into that. It was one of the things I've always had on that I think we tell our peers all the time is you got to put your selling shoes on every day, because as a CIO, you're trying to sell your peers, you're trying to sell your stakeholders, on whatever strategy or initiative you're trying to bring forward. And so what was exciting to me is what's always been, second nature to me as a CIO is being engaged with our go-to-market team. So how do we leverage technology to help drive revenue for the organization? One of my key phrases is follow the revenue, and how your company makes money, and align what you do to that. And obviously reducing risk and optimizing costs, but really flow of revenue to me is one of the most critical things for us to focus on. And so coming into Netskope, everyone always said, "Hey, how's it, working at a vendor?" And what's exciting about this role is I am the customer for our technology. And so we have our customer zero program here, which means I test everything before customers ever see it. And so sometimes you call that eat your own dog food. I like to call drink your own champagne. But I get to use our technology and then have talk to customers about how we use it, the value it delivers. And I always love those conversations because it helps me learn new things about how to use our technology in creative ways. One of those was, I remember early on, I was talking to a CIO at a customer, and they said they were using our technology for change management. I said, "Well, we're a security vendor. Help me understand that a little bit better." And they said, "Well, we coach our users to use the applications we have versus ones we don't. And we also, when we're changing applications, we coach our users and tell them, hey, this is the application that you use today. It's being replaced by this new application." And so they're not just relying on email and people attending webinars, which we know they never attend, they never read the emails. They were using it for change management. And so I then implemented that very early on inside Netskope. So I learned from our customers at the same time. But when we think about the go-to-market side, one of the things that was what was appealing to me. So part of my role, I also lead our strategy office. And as part of that, it's looking at go-to-market strategy, it's influencing product strategy, it's working with external people, whether they be CIOs and CISOs, to influence our direction. And one of those things that I built out in that capacity was a value engineering team. And mainly because what I told our sales teams is, when I'm looking at a purchase, the first thing I ask my team is, do I need more budget, or am I working within my existing budget? Because that frames what I need, how I need to be thinking internally. And then also, depending on the delegation of authority, I may not have the ability to sign off on a purchase all on my own. And so I'm going to have to take this forward to my CFO, my CEO, depending on, how large the purchase is. And I need to be able to tell them a succinct story around the value this is creating for the organization, even if I have the budget for it. And so those are a couple of the areas. And then in addition is looking at the market competitively. That's part of a key component of a company strategy. What is the market doing? What are our competitors doing? And then how does that inform our strategy? So when I look at my role, all of those things make up my role at Netskope, which makes it more exciting than just being the looking after corporate IT for a technology company.
Yeah, I think many of the components that you mentioned that you have responsibility for, I really think several of those are things that all CIOs need to do. They need to follow the revenue. They need to know how they're contributing to the success of their company in the marketplace. And I think it's really unique that you guys, use the tool sets that your company produces. That's a really unique position for you guys to be in. So I know I've heard you talk several times in the past about zero trust. There's a lot of buzz around that term. But from your perspective, what does doing zero trust right actually look like from your experience?
Yeah, Kirk, and you're absolutely right. A lot of times when you say zero trust, you either get oh yeah, we've got a program around that, or you get eye rolls. And you always have mixed emotions when you bring that up. When I think about our advisory boards and advisory groups, and we say the word zero trust, like, oh my gosh, that word is so overused. Can we stop
Yeah.
saying zero trust? I use an example. I like to think about when I think about zero trust, I like to think about zero-based budgeting. So any CIO listen to this would appreciate that term. You don't end with zero, but you start with zero and you build up and you say, why do you basically give justification for whatever budget you're going to get and why you have different investments being made. And so when you think about zero trust, you don't end with zero. You may, if you're a threat actor, and say, well, absolutely, you're going to get zero trust, but you're generally establishing some level of trust. And the challenge that we've seen, and it was interesting, we had a customer that had shifted from a competitor's product, and they made a comment and said they saw that they were bypassing 70% of their internet traffic. And so if they're bypassing 70% of their traffic, how can they apply zero trust to that traffic if they're
Yep.
not even inspecting it?
Yep.
And so when I think about this, there's a lot of different things that we have to take into account when it comes to context. And so I think about, can we tell who that person or that workload or that device is that's trying to connect to whatever application or resource? So there's the identity aspect. There's trust around the device itself. What's the security posture? Is it got the latest patching? What level of trust do I have on the device? There's a new dimension which I bring in, which I call browser trust. And that's, the enterprise browser has brought, that out. That's an area that, we've made a decision to invest around as an extension of our platform back in February of this year. But it's, do I trust the browser? Another customer, large global media firm, said, when they saw, some of the products in the market and saw the Netskope product, they said, why would I go duplicate all of my policies around how I think about my zero trust and how I make those decisions around what trust someone should have? Why would I duplicate all those and put them on an island? And so instead, I just want to
Yeah.
extend those policies to, you know, from what I already have, and then layer in things like disable cut and paste, disable, you know, the screen shares, disable, put watermarks on content. So we've got identity device and browser trust. The next thing we look at is, do I trust the application or destination the person is going to? Oftentimes, a lot of times, if you think about firewalls, next gen firewalls, when they came out in the late 2000s, it was really, that's what they were focused on. Application awareness. Is the application safe? The other one is location. Is the person connecting from a location I trust? Are they connecting from an office or home? Are they connecting from the other side of the world? Are they in China? I'll take a very different approach if they're connecting from China. And so those five things are really, what a lot of people use just to make the decision of, do I allow someone to access something? But I correlate that to, if I think about the SaaS world particularly, it's like you go into a multifamily housing. So you're in a building in New York City and you're just the doorman saying, yep, I've seen you before. You're going to the right room. you look trustworthy, and they're just basically saying, okay, go on. But once you get past the doorman, you get on the elevator, you could really go to any floor in the building. You could get off and go to any
That's
room in
right.
the building.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do is really take it a step further and say, am I going to the right instance of the application that that person's supposed to be accessing? So is it my Microsoft 365 environment or someone else's? And so that's correlated to the room in the building. And then once I'm in the building, what am I doing in that room? Am I, if I'm going into a friend's apartment, they've got a really expensive wine collection. Am I going over and just cracking open a bottle of any bottle of wine in their wine collection? Or am I, picking the bottle that's maybe the one that's the Tuesday wine, not the Friday or Saturday wine? And so that's that, looking activity to say, is that a risky activity or non-risky activity? If I contextualize that into Gen AI, am I going to my instance of a generative AI tool? Am I going to my enterprise chat GPT or a personal instance? And then my activity is, am I uploading data, or am I simply just asking like for a recipe? Or am I saying, can you reformat this content that I've written? Or am I looking for ideation or using it as search? How am I actually using that information? The next dimension comes into the security hygiene of the user. And you and I have always seen this. We have not all people have good security hygiene. What's funny is oftentimes as you get higher up in the organization, the security hygiene tends to actually get worse than better
Mhm.
because a lot of times leaders are so busy they don't take time for the security awareness training. We have to hound them. We have to exempt them from the being on the naughty list when it comes to getting their security awareness training done. And so the security hygiene, or what I would say is also digital hygiene, may not be where we want. And so being able to decide what level of trust I have for that person based on their own digital or security hygiene also comes into the equation. And then there's simply the data. Is it sensitive data? Is it intellectual property? Is it source code? Or is it something that's not sensitive? And so when I take all that different context into account, then I decide what action I want to take. Do I want to block it? Do I want to allow it? Do I want to allow them to proceed, but they have to justify why they're doing it first? Do I want to have them? Do I ever want to make sure it's really them? A good example would be if I have someone logging into my AWS console and trying to, stop a service in the middle of the business day. That's a high risk activity. I want to make sure that's really that person. So I may want to step up authentication. I may even want to ask them why they're doing it in the middle of the business day. And so that could be a policy. It could just be simply coaching. You shouldn't be using this tool for these purposes. Do you agree and move forward? And so, that what I call when I think about zero trust, I really think about this concept of continuous adaptive trust or an adaptive security architecture, which is, really, making what is the right decision in the moment, given, where I'm at inside that building. I'm in my friend's apartment. What am I allowing that person to do?
Thank you for the conversation today. I've really enjoyed it. Two things always happen when I get a chance to spend time with you. I learn something new and I come away with an idea that I need to think about in the job that I do. So both of those things have occurred again. Encourage our audience to go check out the video interview as it gets out on the CDO magazine site. And Mike, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.